Lolly's 6-inch frame quivered as she stepped gingerly out of her sleek, egg-shaped scout pod. The Earth atmosphere was warmer than she'd expected, heavy with the scent of damp soil and blooming vegetation. Her mission was simple enough: collect samples of the planet's plant life and return to the mothership with data that might prove Earth a suitable refuge. But simple didn't mean easy, especially for a newly licensed scout barely out of her adolescence. Her bright green antennae flicked forward as her dark, glossy eyes scanned the forest floor. A lush fern loomed over her, its feathery fronds swaying in a gentle breeze. She unfolded a shimmering tool from her belt and began to snip carefully at the stem. The plant was heavier than anticipated, and Lolly found herself wrestling to balance it across her shoulders. That's when she felt it. The shift in the air, the faint tremor in the ground. Someone was approaching. Her antennae whipped around to pinpoint the source, and her breath caught. A towering figure emerged from between two colossal tree trunks, casting a long shadow over her and the fern she carried. A human. Lolly had seen humans before, but always from the safety of holographic displays. They were the villains in cautionary tales told to young scouts like her. Humans. Enormous. Dangerous. Unpredictable, and most terrifying of all, known to consume anything smaller than themselves. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but fear rooted her to the spot. She stood frozen, a wide-eyed emerald dot on the forest floor. The human stopped, his expression changing from blank curiosity to surprised concern. "Hey, what's that?" he murmured, leaning down. His voice rumbled like distant thunder to Lolly's sensitive ears. She backed up a step, almost tripping, over her own feet. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, not in malice but in puzzlement. He had sandy brown hair that was disheveled, as though he'd been hiking for hours, and his clothes were streaked with dirt. He reached up almost reflexively and scratched his head as if trying to make sense of what he was seeing. To Lolly, the gesture looked disturbingly predatory. She clutched the fern tighter, as though it might shield her. He knelt down slowly, one knee sinking into the dirt. The motion sent a ripple of panic through Lolly. Her pulse thrummed in her ears. She didn't know what to do. If she ran, she might lose her samples or draw the human's attention. If she stayed, he might snatch her up in one of those enormous hands, and if he opened his mouth— Her antennae shivered violently at the thought. Lolly squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for him to reach out to grab her. In her mind, she pictured the teeth. Those terrible, enormous teeth. Surely this was how her first mission would end, devoured by the very creatures she was supposed to study. Lolly's instincts finally overpowered her fear. Clutching the fern, she whirled around and darted off as fast as her small legs could carry her. The enormous human startled, stumbling back before rising quickly to his feet. "Wait, don't run," the human called out. His voice rolled over her like a wave, a deep booming sound that made her antennae vibrate. Lolly didn't dare glance back. She just focused on weaving through the maze of towering plants and roots that sprawled around her. She leapt over patches of moss, dodged under fallen branches, and used her wings for short bursts of speed, all in a desperate effort to escape. Every time her tiny heart began to hope she'd lost him, she'd hear his footsteps crashing through the underbrush behind her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he shouted again, but the reassurance meant nothing to her. After all, didn't the best predators always lull their prey into a false sense of safety? Her people's stories about humans painted them as clever hunters. She didn't want to find out if the tales were true. Lolly's sprint led her to the opening of a hollowed-out log. It was damp and dark inside, but it provided a narrow escape. She darted into it without hesitation, her luminous body dimming instinctively as she pressed herself against the bark. The faint glow of her skin, normally a comforting light, now felt like a beacon that could give away her hiding place. She stayed as still as possible, every muscle tense, her tiny hands clutching the fern like a lifeline. Outside, the footsteps slowed. "Where did you go?" the human muttered. Lolly could see his massive boots just beyond the log's entrance. The ground shook as he knelt down. His breath was audible, loud and steady, and she felt her own breath quicken in response. Then, silence. He didn't peer into the log. He didn't try to grab her. He just stayed there, quietly looking around, his movements careful and deliberate. This confused her. If he was trying to catch her, why wasn't he reaching in to seize her? She waited, every second feeling like an eternity, until finally he rose and took a few steps back. Lolly dared to peek out from her hiding place. What she saw didn't match the horrifying tales from her people's holovids. The human wasn't glaring or snarling. He didn't look angry at all. His brows were drawn together in a mix of curiosity and what looked like concern. He scanned the area, not with predatory calculation, but with an odd sort of patience. "Look, I'm not trying to hurt you," he said again, his voice softer now. "If you're scared, I get it. I just want to help." Lolly blinked. Help? What kind of trick was this? Her fear didn't dissipate entirely, but it wavered, mixed with a hint of curiosity. She stayed hidden for now, watching as the human eventually sighed, stood up fully, and stepped back even farther. Though he still lingered, he no longer appeared intent on chasing her. He looked puzzled, as though unsure of what to do next. Lolly's mind spun. Her heart still raced, but doubt crept in alongside her panic. What was this human's game? Why hadn't he pounced when he had the chance? Could it be that the stories were wrong? Or was he simply a better hunter than she imagined? As she crouched in her hiding place, one thing became clear. This human wasn't acting as she'd been taught to expect, and that made him even more unpredictable and far more unsettling. Lolly didn't dare leave the hollow log, but her glowing antennae twitched, alert to every sound outside. The human stood nearby, not moving closer, but not leaving either. He seemed to be watching over her hiding spot, his large frame turning, occasionally, as if scanning for something. At first she thought it might be another trick. Maybe he was simply waiting for her to let her guard down so he could snatch her up. But then she heard it, the subtle crackle of leaves to her right. It wasn't the heavy footfalls of the human. It was lighter, more cautious. Something was creeping closer. The human must have heard it too. He turned toward the sound and stiffened. "Oh no," he muttered, stepping between the log and whatever approached. Lolly peered out just enough to see what had caught his attention. Her blood ran cold. A fox, sleek, red-furred, and very much larger than she was, stalked out of the bushes. Its sharp eyes gleamed, fixed on the hollow log. Lolly knew that look. Her small size made her a perfect target for predators, and while she had always been taught to fear humans, she knew from experience that the native creatures of many planets could be just as dangerous. The fox lowered its head, sniffing the air, inching closer with every step. Lolly scrambled back into the log as far as she could go, heart pounding. She expected the human to step aside. After all, he had no reason to protect her, right? He'd seen her, she was helpless, and the fox was far more suited to the role of a predator than he was. Instead, the human dropped his backpack to the ground and made himself appear larger. He stomped the earth and waved his arms. "Go on. Get out of here," he shouted. His voice wasn't the soft, coaxing tone he'd used earlier. It was loud, firm, and commanding. The fox froze, ears flattening. It took a hesitant step back, then another. Finally, it turned tail and bolted into the underbrush. The human stood there for a moment longer, making sure it was really gone, before relaxing with a sigh. He picked up his backpack, dusted off his knees and looked back at the hollow log. "It's okay now," he said gently. "You're safe." Lolly didn't know what to think. She had seen the human's actions, heard his voice, both when he was scaring off the fox and now when he spoke as if to reassure her. Could it be that he had saved her? Not because he wanted to eat her later, not because he had some nefarious plan, but just because he wanted to help? Her instincts warred with her growing curiosity. She didn't fully trust him. Couldn't, not yet. But she found herself inching closer to the edge of the log. If he truly wanted to harm her, he'd had the perfect opportunity just now. Instead, he had protected her, even putting himself between her and the fox. Lolly's small voice trembled as she called out from the shadows of the log, "Why did you do that?" The human crouched down again, keeping his distance this time. "You looked scared. I didn't want anything to happen to you." His words, so simple and sincere, threw Lolly's worldview into disarray. This wasn't how humans were supposed to act. They were supposed to be ruthless, indifferent giants. Yet this one had risked himself to ensure her safety. She didn't know if she could fully trust him yet, but one thing was clear. Her understanding of humans was beginning to shift. Lolly remained hidden in the hollow log, her glowing eyes studying the human as he knelt some distance away. The forest was silent again, save for the occasional rustle of leaves overhead. The man didn't move closer. He simply stayed put, waiting. "You're still here," she said quietly, her tiny voice carrying just enough to reach him. She wasn't sure if he could understand her words, but speaking them aloud made her feel braver. "Why aren't you doing something?" Evan tilted his head slightly. "What do you mean?" "I'm just trying not to scare you." His tone was calm, almost patient. "You've had a rough day. I just want to help." Help. There was that word again. Lolly turned it over in her mind, trying to find a hidden meaning. Her people's stories never mentioned humans wanting to help. They always described them as dangerous, reckless creatures driven by instincts alone. Yet this one had chased off. A fox had spoken softly when she expected him to roar. If he truly meant her harm, wouldn't he have acted by now? She shifted her grip on the fern she still carried, her fingers brushing against its textured stem. The plant felt so heavy, not just in weight, but in symbolism. It was proof of her mission, of her purpose here. If she failed to bring back this sample, she would be seen as incapable, weak. But in her current state, shaking, exhausted, and unsure, she couldn't carry it much farther. With trembling legs, Lolly stepped out of the hollow log. Her luminous body glowed faintly in the dappled sunlight. The human's gaze softened when he saw her, and he didn't make any sudden movements. Instead, he just offered a small smile and lowered himself onto one knee. Lolly hesitated. Her mind screamed at her to retreat, to bolt back into the safety of the log. But a quieter, more curious voice told her to wait, to see what he would do next. She had to know. Was this human an anomaly, a creature unlike the rest of his kind? Or was he deceiving her, waiting for her to come closer before striking? Her glowing green wings quivered slightly as she fluttered toward him, stopping just a few inches away. She was so small that she could see every line on his palm as he extended his hand, slowly, gently. His fingers rested against the earth, open and unmoving, an invitation rather than a threat. "I won't hurt you," Evan said softly. "I promise." Promises. Lolly's people didn't believe in human promises, but in that moment she wanted to believe. Her hands clenched around the fern stem before she finally let it drop, just for a moment. She took a step forward, her tiny feet landing on the warm skin of his hand. Evan stayed perfectly still, his breath steady and calm. He could feel the faintest tickle as she walked across his palm, her bioluminescence glowing faintly. Her body was impossibly light, like a delicate leaf landing in his hand. He didn't close his fingers, didn't trap her. He just held her, there, marveling at the impossibility of this encounter. "You're amazing," he said, almost to himself. Lolly tilted her head, unsure if she understood the words but recognizing the tone. He wasn't mocking her, he wasn't gloating. He simply sounded awed. For the first time, Lolly spoke directly to him, her voice stronger than before. "Why? Why are you helping me?" Evan's eyes met hers. "Because I can. Because it's the right thing to do." It wasn't the answer she'd expected, but it was the answer she needed. For the first time in her life, Lolly felt the weight of her people's stories begin to lift. Maybe, just maybe, not all humans were the monsters she'd been told to fear. This one at least was something different entirely. Tasks. Lolly stood in the human's palm, the fern sample at her side. She had never been this close to a human before, never imagined she could be. Her people's warnings about humans as wild, voracious predators didn't align with what she was seeing. Now, he could have crushed her, trapped her, or used her as bait for one of the planet's creatures. Instead, he waited patiently, as if he knew how delicate the balance of trust was. "Where are you from?" he asked after a moment, his voice quiet and measured. Lolly hesitated. She didn't know the human word for her home world, and even if she did, would he believe her? Instead, she gestured toward the sky with one delicate hand. "Far," she said simply. She hoped it was enough. The human's brow furrowed as he processed her reply. "Far away, from space," he guessed. She nodded, her tiny antennae bobbing with the motion. He let out a low whistle and leaned back slightly, careful to keep his hand steady. "I knew you weren't from around here, but... wow." Lolly watched his face, trying to read his expressions. Humans were so large, their movements so exaggerated compared to her own people. Yet this one seemed gentle. If he was pretending, he was very good at it. But deep down, she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, his kindness was real. She tapped the edge of his palm, signaling she wanted to step off. He immediately placed his hand near a smooth patch of moss so she could hop onto it. Once, on solid ground, she hefted the fern onto her back again and turned to face him. "You helped me," she said slowly. Her language wasn't designed for human ears, but she spoke clearly enough that he could understand her meaning. "Why?" The man, Evan, as he finally introduced himself, rubbed the back of his neck. "You looked like you needed it. I mean, I've never seen anything like you before, but that doesn't mean I'd just let something bad happen to you." Lolly tilted her head. "Even if I'm different?" "Different doesn't mean bad," he said simply. "Besides, I figure, if you're out here collecting plants, you're not here to hurt anyone." His logic felt so straightforward, so matter-of-fact, that Lolly found herself nodding. Maybe he wasn't trying to fool her. Maybe he truly meant what he said. The stories she'd grown up with couldn't account for this kind of human. One who acted not out of fear or anger, but compassion. With her fern sample secured, Lolly pointed to another patch of strange earth foliage nearby. Evan tilted his head. "You want more of these?" he asked, gesturing to the plants. Lolly nodded, unsure of the exact words to say. "Okay," he said, rising carefully. "I'll help." He spent the next few minutes gently plucking samples, of plants she pointed out. Each time he laid the pieces in a pile near her pod, careful not to damage them. Lolly observed him closely. He didn't just take the plants, he handled them delicately, as though he respected them. It was an attitude she hadn't expected from a human, and it made her rethink all the stories she'd been told. As the sun began to set, Lolly's pod hummed to life, its scanners glowing softly. She looked back at Evan, her tiny voice barely audible. "Thank you." Evan smiled. "You're welcome, little space traveler. You take care of yourself, okay?" She nodded. With the fern sample and a few other plants secured inside her pod, she took one last look at him before the door, sealed shut. As she lifted off, she watched him wave from the ground. Her antennae twitched in a mixture of disbelief and wonder. When she returned to her people, Lolly shared the samples and the story of her encounter. Many were skeptical, but some, those who had always wondered if humans were truly as fearsome as legend said, listened closely. Over time, her tale of the strange, kind human began to circulate, casting doubt on the old beliefs. Perhaps humans weren't all monsters. Perhaps they were capable of understanding, of helping. Lolly couldn't be sure what the future held, but she knew one thing. Her first solo mission hadn't just brought back valuable data. It had given her a reason to question, to hope, and to believe that maybe, just maybe, some humans could be allies after all.